In a small, seemingly peaceful village, there lies a dark secret no one could have ever imagined. Picture this: you live in a community where everything feels calm and undisturbed, yet one day, a raid on a house will uncover a truth so terrifying, you'll struggle to believe your eyes. Strange, unthinkable things that seem too horrific to be real, but here they are. How could someone living among us create such disturbing horrors? How did a man like Edward Gein manage to hide these dark deeds for so long without anyone noticing? You can't even imagine the things they found when they opened that door. But what did they find? How could someone like Edward Gein, who seemed so normal, live undetected in the heart of this small town for all those years? What really happened? The question leaves you shivering with uncertainty. How could this man be right under their noses for so long without anyone realizing the horrifying truth? So, what truly happened? Let's dive deep into the chilling and disturbing case of one of America's most infamous killers, Edward Gein, and discover what led to his downfall. And remember, if you find this story truly captivating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can bring you even more thrilling, spine-chilling videos like this one. Are you ready to venture into the mind of a real-life monster? Comment below with your thoughts on this story, and I'll be sure to reply to all your thoughts. Tragic descent into infamy as one of America's most notorious criminals cannot be understood without first examining the psychological landscape of his childhood. Born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, Gein was the son of George and Augusta Gein, whose marital dynamics were anything but ordinary. His father, an alcoholic, was frequently absent from family life, leaving his wife Augusta in control of the family's affairs. Augusta, a devout and deeply religious woman, imposed strict rules on her two sons, seeking to shelter them from what she believed was a corrupt and sinful world. This early environment was marked by emotional and psychological neglect, as well as the imposition of an intense maternal control. Augusta's teachings on the evils of the world, her disdain for all women, and her belief that only she could save her children from eternal damnation set the stage for the internal conflict Edward would experience throughout his life. His childhood isolation was compounded by the death of his father, leaving Gein to cling to the controlling figure of his mother even more tightly. This foundation, laden with psychological strain and emotional deprivation, planted the seeds of his later pathological behaviors. In particular, Augusta's extreme religious views seemed to create a mental environment where Ed's attachment to her became pathological, feeding into a severe sense of dependency and unhealthy reverence for his mother. As a young man, Gein's social interactions were limited, but it was clear to anyone who had contact with him that his mental and emotional state was unusual. His peers noticed his odd behaviors, such as frequent bouts of uncontrollable laughter, even at inappropriate moments. Yet, despite his social awkwardness, Gein was considered a somewhat harmless figure by the local community. His disturbing relationship with his mother, however, prevented him from forming any meaningful attachments or developing a sense of independence. This isolation, alongside his attachment to his mother, gradually pushed Gein deeper into the recesses of his own disturbed mind. As his mother's health began to decline, Gein's emotional deterioration accelerated. In 1945, after Augusta suffered a debilitating stroke and died, Gein was left utterly shattered. His grief over the loss of his mother was profound, and he could not cope with the fact that the one constant figure in his life, the one person he believed he needed to live for, was gone. His death, Gein's behavior became increasingly bizarre. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, he began a disturbing pattern of behavior. He would visit local cemeteries, exhume freshly buried bodies, and steal body parts. The grave robbing gave him a perverse form of control over death, a way to bring back something from the dead, to rekindle a connection to his mother. Gein's activities were not merely about taking body parts for the sake of macabre curiosity. He sought to preserve and manipulate them. His fascination with human anatomy extended beyond grave robbing to an obsession with turning human remains into functional objects, which he believed could help him feel closer to his mother. He began creating items like masks, furniture, and even a human suit crafted from the skin of women, a twisted attempt to become one with his mother. The psychological underpinnings of this behavior lie in the concept of the Oedipal complex, a psychoanalytic theory that suggests a child may experience intense feelings of attachment and possessiveness toward the parent of the opposite sex. For Gein, his mother's authoritarian control over his life created a deeply distorted desire to resurrect her in any form possible. It wasn't until November 1957 that Gein's horrendous acts were discovered, following the disappearance of a local woman named Bernice Worden. A series of investigative steps led police to Gein's farm, where they uncovered evidence of his unimaginable actions. Upon entering Gein's home, they found various items constructed from human remains, including a lampshade made of human skin, skulls mounted as bedposts, and severed body parts. Among these, Gein's most infamous creation was the woman's suit, a full-body outfit made from the skin of his victims, which he would wear, mimicking the women he had murdered in a twisted attempt to embody his mother. The horror of what they discovered in Gein's home defies comprehension. The fact that he had been able to conceal these acts for years in such an isolated area speaks to the degree of mental distortion that Gein had experienced. His activities were not only an expression of necrophilic tendencies but also a deep psychological need to reconnect with the lost maternal figure, transcending the boundaries of life and death. From a psychological standpoint, Gein's actions can be understood as a combination of several deep-seated factors: a traumatic childhood, extreme emotional deprivation, obsessive maternal attachment, and an unaddressed mental illness. His crimes are perhaps the most extreme form of the Oedipal complex taken to a grotesque, homicidal end. Gein sought to reconstruct the maternal image in his mind by any means necessary, even if that meant desecrating the bodies of other women. Moreover, his isolated lifestyle and lack of meaningful social connections likely exacerbated his inability to distinguish between normal behavior and his increasingly distorted reality. The disconnection from society, paired with his inner turmoil and emotional trauma, set the stage for him to develop a skewed sense of reality where death was not final, it was a resource from which he could derive power and control. Gein's case highlights the importance of understanding the psychological impact of trauma, emotional neglect, and isolation in the formation of violent behaviors. His descent into madness was a tragic result of years of mental and emotional strain, compounded by a warped familial relationship. He didn't simply kill to satisfy base urges, he killed to fulfill an emotional need that could never be met by any living person. This academic analysis of Edward Gein's life and crimes sheds light on the complex psychological mechanisms that contributed to his horrific acts. His story is one of profound tragedy, a life shaped by loss, obsession, and a tortured mind. Understanding such extreme cases forces us to confront the darker aspects of human psychology and underscores the importance of early intervention for mental health issues before they manifest in violent and destructive ways. In the end, Edward Gein's story is a haunting reminder of how deep psychological trauma, isolation, and obsession can manifest in the most horrific ways. His actions were the result of years of mental strain, emotional neglect, and a twisted, unhealthy attachment to his mother. Gein's life was one of sorrow and dysfunction, which eventually led him to commit crimes so grotesque they defied belief. But at the core of his story, we must ask, how could society allow someone to spiral into such madness without intervention? It's not just a story of murder and grave robbing, it's a story of how a person's broken psyche can unravel into unimaginable horror. As we reflect on his crimes, it's clear that his mental state was severely impacted by the trauma of his upbringing and the loss of his mother. While it's easy to focus on the shocking nature of his actions, it's equally important to remember the psychological conditions that played a role in his descent. And yet, there is no excuse for the devastation he caused, and no forgiveness for the lives he took. Edward Gein was a man who was deeply disturbed, but also a product of an environment that failed to recognize the early signs of his mental instability. It's a chilling reminder to all of us, sometimes the most innocent-seeming people can harbor the darkest secrets. So, what can we learn from this horrific story? Ultimately, the story of Edward Gein teaches us the importance of awareness, both in our communities and in our personal lives. It's essential that we recognize the signs of psychological distress and intervene early before a person becomes a danger to themselves or others. Whether it's seeking help, offering support, or simply being aware of the people around us, it's up to us to prevent such tragedies from happening. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the chilling story of Edward Gein. If this story made you reflect on the darker side of human nature, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking videos like this. Your support helps us bring you even more captivating, in-depth content. And if you have any thoughts or reflections on this story,